Iran prepares massive attack on Israel. Emergency security meeting called as fighter jets roar over Tehran.
The night sky over Tehran is not quiet. It hasn't been quiet for hours. Fighter jets are tearing low arcs above the capital, their afterburners painting bright scars across the darkness. And inside a sealed room in Jerusalem, the Prime Minister of Israel has just summoned his entire security cabinet on emergency notice. The clock on the wall doesn't matter anymore. The only clock that matters now is the one nobody can see, the one counting down to whatever Iran is about to do next. This is not a drill. This is not a routine alert. Multiple Iranian outlets are reporting unusual military air activity above Tehran, with parallel movements detected near Erbil in northern Iraq. Israeli officials have moved into a closed-door session. American security personnel have gone on record stating they are fully prepared for any possible Iranian action. 3 separate signals. 1 direction of travel. The region is leaning hard toward something it cannot easily walk back from. Within minutes of those first jet sightings, intelligence cells across 3 continents began reading the same picture. Tehran's air corridor is not behaving normally. The dispersal pattern is not a parade. It is not a flyover. It is the kind of movement air forces conduct when they are repositioning assets before something happens, not after. And that single observation has already shrunk the window for diplomacy from days down to hours. To understand why Jerusalem is sitting around an emergency table tonight, you have to understand what an Iranian attack on Israel actually looks like on the operational level. It is not one missile. It is not one drone. It is a layered, choreographed wave designed to overload every layer of Israeli air defense at the same time. The opening salvo would almost certainly be Shahed 136 loitering munitions, slow, cheap, propeller-driven, and built for one purpose: to soak up interceptors. Behind them, faster cruise missiles flying terrain-hugging profiles. And behind those, the heavy-punch medium-range ballistic missiles arcing into space before plunging back down at hypersonic terminal speeds. The drones are the decoys. The cruise missiles are the distraction. The ballistic missiles are the kill. That is the architecture. And it is the same architecture that nearly broke through in previous exchanges. Israeli air defense is the most tested in the world, but it is not infinite. Every interceptor fired is an interceptor gone. Iron Dome handles the low and slow. David's Sling handles the medium tier. Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 handle the exo-atmospheric ballistic threats. Each one is a different missile, a different radar queue, a different engagement geometry. And each one has a magazine depth that planners on both sides know down to the round. This is where the math turns ugly. A single Shahed costs Iran roughly $20,000 to build. A single Iron Dome Tamir interceptor costs Israel close to $50,000. An Arrow 3 interceptor costs over $2 million. The cost-exchange ratio is not in Israel's favor. It never was. Tehran's doctrine is built around that imbalance: flood the sky with cheap mass until the defender runs out of expensive answers. Saturation isn't a tactic. It's an economic weapon. And here is the part most observers missed in earlier confrontations. The fighter jet activity over Tehran tonight may not be the strike package itself. It may be the screen. Iranian Su-24s and F-14 Tomcats, yes. Those F-14s, the same ones sold to the Shah decades ago and still flying, have historically been used to patrol high-value airspace during sensitive launches. When Iran fires, it does not want Israeli or coalition aircraft inside its launch corridors. The jets overhead aren't necessarily the attack. They're the curtain being drawn before the attack. Meanwhile, near Erbil, the second signal is even more unsettling. Erbil sits in northern Iraq, inside Kurdish territory, and it has historically been a node for Iranian Revolutionary Guard activity, including missile and drone movements. Air traffic near Erbil at the same time as Tehran's unusual activity is not coincidence. It suggests a multi-vector launch picture strikes potentially originating not just from Iranian soil, but from forward proxy positions across Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and Lebanon. That changes the geometry entirely. Israeli early warning radars facing east have to suddenly account for threats coming from the north, the northeast, and the southeast simultaneously. This is the moment the picture gets harder to defend. A single axis of attack is a problem. A four-axis attack is a nightmare. Each axis forces Israeli command to commit interceptors before knowing where the real weight of the strike is coming from. Spread your defenses too thin, and the ballistic warheads punch through. Concentrate them. And the drones and cruise missiles slip past on the flanks. There is no clean answer. There is only the least bad answer, and Israeli air defense commanders have minutes, not hours, to choose it. Now here is where most people are getting tonight wrong. They are watching the headlines and reading this as Iran preparing to strike. That is half the story. The other half is what Israel is preparing to do if Iran does. Netanyahu's emergency security cabinet does not convene for warnings. It convenes for decisions. And those decisions, once made, do not stay theoretical. The Israeli Air Force operates on a doctrine of preemption when credible intelligence indicates an imminent strike. The question being asked in that Jerusalem room right now is almost certainly not will we respond. It is do we wait or do we hit first? That single question is the most dangerous variable in the entire Middle East tonight. Because the moment Israel decides to preempt, the conflict ceases to be a missile exchange and becomes something far larger. F-15I and F-35I squadrons would need to penetrate or skirt the airspace of multiple sovereign states. Air-to-air refueling tankers would need to deploy. Standoff weapons like the Rampage and Rox missiles would have to be released from extreme ranges to keep aircraft outside Iranian S-300 engagement envelopes. And every one of those movements would be detected within seconds by Russian, Chinese, and American satellites watching the region in real time. The clock is now measured in single-digit hours, maybe less. American forces in the region are already shifting. The United States Navy has historically surged carrier strike groups into the eastern Mediterranean and the Arabian Sea during these spikes. A Nimitz-class or Ford-class carrier is not just a platform, it is a floating air defense city, with Aegis-equipped destroyers and cruisers in escort, each capable of launching SM-3 and SM-6 interceptors against ballistic threats. When American officials say they are fully prepared, what they mean in operational terms is that those ships are already at general quarters, radars are already tracking, and fire control solutions are already being computed against Iranian launch corridors. The Americans are not bystanders. They are a second layer of the same air defense network, integrated by data link, sharing the same picture as Israeli command. But integration has limits. The further east the threat originates, the less the American carrier groups can contribute to the initial intercept. The first wave will be Israel's alone. Arrow 3, the highest tier of Israeli defense, was specifically designed for this scenario to engage Iranian ballistic missiles above the atmosphere, before they reach terminal phase, before they release submunitions or maneuvering warheads. Arrow 3 is one of the most advanced exo-atmospheric interceptors in the world. But there are only so many launchers, and only so many missiles in those launchers. Magazine depth, again, becomes the silent killer of any defense plan. And there is another vulnerability nobody talks about until the sirens start. Israel is small. Geographically, strategically, demographically small. The country can be crossed end to end in less than the flight time of a single ballistic missile from western Iran. There is no strategic depth. There is no fallback territory. Every interception has to succeed close to populated areas, which means even a successful intercept rains debris across cities. The defender's win condition is not zero impacts. It is acceptable impacts. That is the brutal calculus Israeli commanders work inside every single time the sirens go off. This is the part that turns reversible into irreversible. Once Iranian missiles are in the air, Iran cannot recall them. Once Israeli interceptors are launched, that magazine round is gone forever. Once the first warhead lands on Israeli soil, the political reality changes for a generation. And once Israel retaliates, and the historical pattern says it will, hard and deep Iranian nuclear infrastructure, command nodes, and ERC bases enter the target list. We are no longer talking about a tit-for-tat exchange. We are talking about the kind of strike that reshapes the regional balance for the next decade. The Iranian leadership knows this. That is the strange paradox of tonight. Tehran is not suicidal. The supreme leader and the Irgi command structure understand exactly what Israeli retaliation looks like, because they have wargamed it as obsessively as the Israelis have wargamed an Iranian first strike. So why move now? Why the jets over Tehran? Why the activity near Erbil? Why the public posture? There are three plausible answers, and each one carries a different weight. The first is deterrence theater, a demonstration designed to make Israel and the United States blink, to extract a diplomatic concession without ever firing a weapon. The second is genuine preparation for a limited, calibrated strike large enough to satisfy domestic political pressure inside Iran, small enough that Iran calculates Israel will absorb it rather than escalate. The third, and the most dangerous, is that tonight is the dress rehearsal for something much larger, and the activity we are seeing is the staging phase of a strike still days away. The problem is that from the outside, all three look identical. A defender cannot distinguish a bluff from a preparation from a rehearsal until the launch sequence actually begins. And by the time the launch sequence begins, it is already too late to do anything except defend. That is why Netanyahu's cabinet is meeting now, and not tomorrow. The cost of waiting is unacceptable. The cost of acting prematurely is also unacceptable. There is no good option in that room tonight, only options ranked by how bad they are. Consider the geometry one more time. From western Iran to central Israel is roughly 1,500 kilometers. An Iranian Khorramshahr 4 ballistic missile, with a range estimated near 2,000 kilometers, covers that distance in approximately 12 to 15 minutes from launch to impact. A Shahed drone, by contrast, takes 6 to 9 hours. That asymmetry is itself a weapon. It means an Iranian commander can launch the drones first, hours in advance, knowing the Israelis will see them coming and will begin committing interceptors to the slow-moving threats. Then, once the drones are inside Israeli airspace and being engaged, the ballistic missiles launch and they arrive while Israeli defenders are still working through the saturation wave. 12 minutes. That is the entire decision window for the upper tier of Israeli defense. 12 minutes to identify, track, classify, prioritize, and engage warheads moving at speeds exceeding Mach 5 on terminal descent. 12 minutes to make decisions that will be analyzed in war colleges for the next 50 years. 12 minutes during which the citizens of Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Jerusalem will be in shelters, listening to the sound of interceptors lifting off and not knowing which sounds are saves and which are misses. And then, the longer game begins. Because even if Israel intercepts 95% of incoming threats, a remarkable success rate by any historical standard, the remaining 5% still impacts. With a saturation wave of several hundred munitions, 5% means dozens of warheads reaching the ground. Some will land in open desert. Some will not. The damage assessment in the first hour after a strike is the most consequential intelligence product in modern warfare, because it dictates the scope and intensity of the response. A warhead in a field is a different war than a warhead in a city. The strategic stakes extend far beyond the immediate exchange. Iran is not fighting alone in posture. Hezbollah in southern Lebanon sits with an estimated 150,000 rockets and missiles aimed at northern Israel, the largest non-state arsenal in the world. The Houthis in Yemen have demonstrated repeatedly that they can reach Israeli territory with anti-ship and land attack missiles. Iranian-aligned militias in Iraq and Syria operate drone and rocket platforms within easy reach of Israeli, American, and coalition assets. If Tehran goes, the entire axis goes. That is not theory. That is doctrine, openly published in Iranian strategic literature for years. Which means the moment the first Iranian missile crosses into Israeli airspace, 4 other fronts can light up simultaneously. Northern Israel under Hezbollah barrage. Southern Israel under Houthi missile threat. American bases in Iraq and Syria under militia attack. Gulf shipping lanes under threat from Iranian fast attack craft and anti-ship missiles. This is no longer a bilateral exchange. This is a regional war in its opening minutes. And that is the calculation sitting on the table in Jerusalem tonight. Not whether Israel can defend against a single Iranian strike, it almost certainly can, even if imperfectly, but whether Israel can defend against a coordinated, multi-front, multi-vector escalation while simultaneously preparing the retaliatory strike that will reshape the region. The answer to that question is what determines whether Netanyahu authorizes preemption, or whether he orders the country into a defensive crouch and waits. There is a quieter dimension to all of this, one that rarely makes the headlines. Israel's nuclear posture is officially ambiguous, but it exists. Iran's nuclear program is officially civilian, but it is now estimated to be only weeks from weapons-grade enrichment thresholds. Every escalation, every emergency cabinet meeting, every jet over Tehran brings both arsenals closer to relevance. Not because either side wants to use them, neither does, but because in a region this dense, this fast, and this saturated with grievance, the worst-case scenarios are no longer dismissible. They are simply less likely than the others. The fighter jets over Tehran will land eventually. The cabinet in Jerusalem will conclude eventually. The American carriers will continue their patrol patterns. And tomorrow, the headlines may say the crisis cooled, or they may say something else entirely. But the architecture that produced tonight does not go away. The drone factories in Iran continue to produce. The interceptor production lines in Israel continue to produce. The proxy networks remain armed. The intelligence cells continue to watch each other across satellite feeds and signals intercepts. Tonight is not the war. Tonight is a single frame in a war that has been running on simmer for decades, and that now seems to be approaching a temperature it cannot hold. The verdict from the operational level is this: the Middle East is no longer waiting for a war to start. It is waiting to discover which incident is going to be the one that nobody can de-escalate. The activity over Tehran tonight may be that incident. Or it may be one more flash in a long sequence of flashes. But the trajectory is unmistakable, and the systems on both sides are now postured in a way that makes the next miscalculation more dangerous than the last. For the analysts watching, the warfighters preparing, and the civilians sleeping under the flight paths, one fact stands above all the others. The cost of being wrong has never been higher. The window for being right has never been narrower. And the only certainty tonight is that somewhere, in Jerusalem and Tehran and Washington, and along a dozen forward positions across the region, men and women are making decisions whose consequences will outlive every headline written about them. If you want the next breakdown what an Israeli preemptive strike on Iranian launch sites would actually look like, hour by hour, system by system, subscribe now, and you will not miss it. And if you think the decision being made in that Jerusalem room tonight changes the entire equation for the region, drop your read in the comments. The clock is still running.